Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Whatever time zone you're at, this is the Seraphim, and I'm here with another tutorial. It's been quite some time since my last one, so I hope I'm doing things properly. But yeah, let's get to it. This is the kick. I made a little sample project here. Yeah, let's get it in.
Deeper, fucking deeper.
Okay, so if you want to make that or make something similar to that, this is how I did it. So we are using Citrus. Citrus is a phenomenal FM synthesis plugin. The main reason why we want this is because of its ability to start adding other harmonics. So essentially, whatever oscillator, in this sense, they're called operators. Whatever operator is in the main oscillator is actually affecting that main one. So whatever movement you do here, it is definitely affecting down to the phase itself. Yeah, so let's go in. This is the main operator. This is the main one that we're using. These other two are just affecting it. Going in, we have a pitch envelope working on the tempo. So what, 1/16 of a note, and it is being pitched already. Then after on the volume, I have a volume down. I do have this sweep up, I guess you could say, specifically to separate the tail from the punch. Already I want to set myself up for greatness. So yeah, going in, we have the operators doing the exact same thing. The only difference is that the punch is taken out because we only want this to really affect the tail. And yeah, so both of these doing the same thing. Both of them have pitch automations, and these are baseline half. So wherever this knob is, the pitch envelope knob, it's always going to be on the right note. In this case, I wanted a bit more punch, so I brought the envelope down a bit. The issue with doing this is that it cuts, essentially it messes with the pitch, so it's not on the same note as these are. So what I had to do was put this onto a different track and use G-Tune, which is a free plugin. It does exactly what it says, which is just tune the plugin, make sure that it's on the right note. And that's when I start messing with the pitch envelope to make sure that it's on the right pitch. So yeah, so we go on. Since I just messed with that, it's gonna take a while for me to get on the right note, so good thing I made a second one. Okay, so there's our kick. Yeah, you know what, I forgot to mention, the main reason why I decided on going with a skewed sine wave with a slight pinch on top. The pinch essentially acts as a kind of like a triangle, so it gets that those traits. So a triangle wave tends to have a bit more of the higher register harmonics, which is kind of what I wanted, not just a regular sine, which is mainly the lower. So just adding slightly starts to bring out those highs. If you use a square, it sounds a bit more distorted, but that's not what I wanted to go with because I'm already going to be distorting it afterwards. So slightly skewed just to kind of fit how I wanted the low end to feel. and we could always adjust it as with these knobs. And here, let me just show you. And you could do a lot with this plugin. Trust me, it's phenomenal. But yeah, try it out and you'll be blown away. So let's start off. We have Camel Crusher, another free plugin by Camel Audio, and I'll list all these free plugins, third-party plugins, down below if you want to get them. Yeah, so we have the first patch, Annihilator, with mix down, just so we could get a bit more of that distortion coming in, and to really boost that low end. So okay, so we have an EQ and overdrive. Main reason why I clicked on that overdrive before showing you the EQ is because whatever I do on the EQ, you'll be able to notice through the overdrive. Distortion tends to just bring out whatever frequencies that you want from the EQ, so you kind of want to have the distortion on before you even start messing with this. So yeah, going into it, we have a low cut. Anything below 30 hertz is really unneeded, and just muddies up that kick. So if you cut that out, you clean up that kick, and that's what you want. So you started off, you're starting yourself out for greatness. So cut that down, brought the lower information down. If you have more low end, it affects the it starts affecting the mids and highs. If you start cutting it down, it brings out those mids and highs a bit more. So yeah, just mess around with that, and it's great. So we have our first initial automation, which is the fifth peak. That fifth peak is sweeping across the frequency spectrum within a specific zone, I guess you could say, and it is actually going down in volume back to baseline, so you won't be able to hear what it had done towards the end. This is mainly so we could start manipulating that movement to a kick. So yeah. And as you can see, it's already starting to come out. We have 3 parametric EQs and another blood overdrive. Honestly, you don't really need that much. You could use another plugin, but in this sense, I kind of wanted to keep it as stock as possible. So we have the 4, 6, and 7 moving, being automated, doing the exact same thing. 4 is sweeping across and going down in volume back to baseline. 6 and 7 are just going up and down as it progresses through time. So that's mainly just kind of give it more of that low, more of that mid frequency information. So starting off with mainly low frequency information, after it starts getting those higher harmonics, again, all to make sure that there's movement in the kick. Did the same thing with 6, and I'm starting to boost stuff. Here we find our first peak, bad note, I guess you could say. Bad frequency. So cut that down, brought up the lows, and here is our phaser. Phaser essentially is making the kick a bit more stereo, and giving it a bit more character, I guess you could say. Again, another movement factor, and wave shaper. Wave shaper, all it's doing in this sense, anything from, or at least I've noticed that anything from this line and above is mid to high frequencies. Anything from here below is just low end. So I just kind of have the low end slightly boosted, just kind of give it a bit more drive, and the rest is just give more of that higher end frequency information, a bit more grit, a bit more white noise-ish type of sounds, as you were able to tell right there. Going on, we routed that out, and we have yet another phaser doing the same exact thing, adding more stereo information and messing around with the stages. Starts giving out a bit more different sounds. So if we take that down, yep, that's what it does. Going on, adding another parametric EQ, messing around with the mids and lows, highs, and another wave shaper. Normally this wave shaper, normally these shapes are actually on Isotope Ozone, but for this sense I use wave shaper for you. I do everything for you. So yeah, so this was what I had used, and yeah, so pretty much we have the initial one being a lot more aggressive. It's going to bring out the lows, it's going to add quite a bit of distortion, and the second one is just giving it a bit more drive. So as you can tell, it's giving that grit that you want. Adding another EQ, bringing up the lows, overdrive, and like I had, overdrive, just add a bit more color in that higher end register. Perfect. All right, so going on, we start with the tail. So I rendered out the tail and I separated it in 4 different categories. I used Imager for this, for the band, for the 4 bands, but you could use the same, or you could do the same thing with ReaXcomp. ReaXcomp is a free plugin. It's a compressor instead of an imager, but what you want it for is the 4 bands. And if you fucking take down the ratio and everything, and it has the starting points to make sure that your compressor isn't on, but you could solo that information. So yeah, that's a free plugin that can work instead of the imager. So this is the preset I guess I use. So anything from 140 and below, 140 to 2000 hertz, 2000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20k. Perfect. And I start soloing that out, each individual one. So we have our lows, our mids, our highs after those super high end frequencies that I call the tweet, because tweeters have just that really high end sounds. So yeah, we go on and we separate that out. So we have low end, our mids, our highs, and the super high end, the 10,000 and above. Okay, so as you could already hear, I'm giving it a bit more movement. The lows have that round shape, just so it starts off low or starts off at a lower volume and comes up, just to really give it that modern hardstyle kick feel, I guess you could say, but still isn't as aggressive as a reverse bass. Yeah. So we have the mids. This is essentially reversed and brought up. So the mids essentially come in a bit more as it progresses out, instead of more of a punchy type of or like a hit type of sound. So this is how more modern kicks tend to achieve that, by reversing the mids, reversing the highs, and swapping that out. The only difference is that the low end, you still want that punch, so that tends to be the only thing that isn't reversed. Yeah. And this is odd because it's on pan, but I will explain that because there is a Haas effect. It's essentially a clone. I guess it's a delay, but it's a clone of the original kick, and it's slightly moved through time to kind of give it a bit more phase, and that actually creates a stereo sound. So yeah, so it's essentially just bringing that out more, and now we have a full stereo sound that is on both sides. And here we start affecting it. Phaser and stereo enhancer, because since we added that Haas effect, it is very, very, very stereo, which is not what we want in a kick. You want it slightly mono, at least in this sense, you want it slightly mono. So I brought that down, still keeping a bit more of that stereo information. Going on, we have the highs, and this is where I actually start stretching out the kick, really bringing out that, really stretching out the high information. So if we clone this, I can show you exactly what I'm doing. Oh, clone. So as you can see here, all I did was stretch it out, and just pretty much messed around with it, bring it out, and again, it's reversed, so the lower, so as it progresses through time, it comes out a bit more, and that's just to add on to the movement. I did the exact same thing with the super highs, and let's go back to the 2000 to 10,000 hertz portion, and this is when I start affecting it. So I added a bit more depth to the highs, I guess you could say, and wave shaper to give it a bit more grit. So maybe I should turn that on. So as you can tell, even though it's on just the higher register, it definitely does give it, that boost does give it a bit more of that, a bit more depth. And Flangus doing the exact same thing that the phaser is doing, which is just adding a bit more stereo, EQ, and wave shaper. And this is where the wave shaper comes in. Normally I use Isotope Ozone, but Isotope Trash, but I decided on emulating it with wave shaper. Wave shaper is phenomenal for emulating really any plugin, any distortion, and you could do some quite wonderful things with it. So that's really giving it that grit and distortion sound that we wanted. Going on, we have tweaked, so 10K and above. So we're affecting it. As you could already hear, even though it's super high up there, that mid boost is really giving it a bit more depth. Adding the phaser and wave shaper. And mind you, all this is correlated with this on, so I don't add anything on with this off, because I want to make sure that I'm hearing exactly what the end result will be, which is just that high end portion. Yeah, so now we have this. Pretty good, but we could make it slightly better. So mids, highs, and tweet are all routed to the tail reverb, and the lows are just routed to the tail. The tail reverb, essentially, I'm just adding a bit more of that stereo with stereo separation, and the reverb is essentially giving it a bit more movement as well. Yeah, so bringing that out. Not as aggressive as you would think, but it definitely adds that movement. All that's routed to a tail, or to another bus, I'm sorry, and added a phaser, yet another wave shaper, two wave shapers. So the primary wave shaper is giving it that grit, bringing out those low ends, and the second one is really driving it out. So before, and there you have your tail. So from here we have our main punch. So the punch is essentially in 3 separate portions, and the main reason why I did this was so I could have even more control. I have the click sound, the actual punch sound after the body of the kick. And I'm adjusting them individually, stretching it out. I'm adding pogo, bringing that closer essentially to give it more of a punchy feel. So if I solo that out, we have this. Copy value. That's what it originally sounds like. And that is really giving it a bit more of that click. That's the main punch. Copy, reset. And that's just adding on to the click. Okay, after we have the body is stretched out because in this one, which is the original sound, as you could hear, the punch isn't that long. All this is really the tail at this point. So what I wanted to do was just really stretch out that punch a bit more. So I stretched out the body, and yeah. And there you have your adjusted punch. Now, what I had done with the adjusted punch, I cut the lows. So I cut the lows pretty drastically because I'm going to be adding lows through a third-party punch or third-party drum. So this is when I start affecting it. Phaser, again, what did I do? Adding that stereo width and give it a bit more character. Then after wave shaper, pretty aggressively adding in those high ends. EQ. Wow, okay. And overdrive. You guys want to see this, don't you? What am I doing? Alright, so, and again, cutting those lows, and this is when we start adjusting that EQ. Yep. So we have that. We have our overdrive. Everything's looking pretty good. And reverb slightly, very, very minute, just to kind of give it more of that stereo width. And it's really just widening out that kick. I routed the punch to a reverb and a main punch function, or another main bus, punch bus. And the reverb is doing the same thing that it did with the tail. So cutting that out, and that's a bit more aggressive. That's that raw sound that you kind of want to hear. Adding cashmere punch, or cashmere punchy kick, which I also did that cut to make sure that the click is how I wanted and the tail is how I wanted. Really, really giving it the character that I looked for in this punch. And this is when we start. So pretty much all three of these, punch, the reverb, and the cashmere kick, are routed out to another bus that is getting sent and phased. So the phaser, again, adding the stereo, cutting down those lows, and adjusting as is. So bringing out those low ends, and yeah. So as you can actually see here, if you recall, I cut down the lows from here, and this is the one that actually still has the low end. So I cut the low right under it because this is where the tail is going to begin, and I didn't want any lows mixing together and making this weird sound. So the lows aren't essentially mashing. So anything from here, and out, have no low end whatsoever, so it won't affect the tail. That's one key thing that I wanted to explain. And all that's getting routed out. Being affected with a Camel Crusher. Really bringing out that high end, really bringing out that crunch. And yeah, so putting that all together, we have our kick. So let's bring that out, and this is what our final kick should sound like. Yep. Putting that all together, and we have
Deeper, fucking deeper, fucking deeper.
Yep. So that's how I make my kicks. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope I was as detailed as possible. I will again link the free plugins below, and yeah, have fun, and keep working at it, guys.